if the Prime Minister of Hungary does not act in the national interest of Hungary, he won't be Prime Minister for long. But who's going to act in the national interest of Hungary if their prime minister doesn't do it? If your government is not acting in your national interest, then who will? By the way, we feel the same way about America. So in those instances in which our national interest and some other countries' national interests are aligned, that is an opportunity for extraordinary partnership. And we have many, many areas where our national interests are aligned. Where they're not aligned or where we have some differences, that's where that alignment and the other issues, that's where this relationship, that's where these deep ties to one another are so important, because that's where you can find accommodation, that's where you can hear each other out, that's where maybe you can work together on. But we're not asking any country in the world to isolate themselves from anybody. We understand that every country in the world has to deal with the reality of their geography, of their economy, of their history, and of the challenges of their future. We will obviously share with partners and friends concerns we may have about certain things, but as an example, the United States, you mentioned China as an example. Okay, we have trade and relations with China. The President of the United States is going to travel in April to China. Why? Because China's a big country. It's got 1 billion-something people, second largest economy in the world. They have nuclear weapons. It would be crazy. Okay, it's insane for the United States and China not to have relations and interact with one another. Now, two big countries like this, do we have differences? We absolutely do. And we'll have to manage those differences. And some of those differences are things we've spoken very frankly and clearly and repeatedly about the fact that it is not good for the world. It's not good for anybody to rely on one country or one economy for 90% of anything, especially things like critical supply chains. This is a reality. We want to diversify supply chains around the world. We've spoken clearly about it. That's not an anti-China thing. That's just the reality that over-dependence on one source is not good, and especially when there's been a willingness in the past to use it as leverage against each other. But we expect we pursue these things within the context of the U.S. national interest, and that's why we met with the Chinese in South Korea earlier in the year, and were able to reach an understanding on some trade matters. That was a mutual interest between us and them. So geopolitics is difficult because it requires a little bit of maturity and seriousness. Okay? It requires a little bit of seriousness about these things have real implications, and the balancing of relations between nation states requires maturity and seriousness. So our relationship here, you asked the last question about it. Look, I'm just telling you guys what it is. Okay, the President has an extraordinarily close relationship to the Prime Minister. He does, and it has had tangible benefits in our relationship. I'm not going to speculate about the future. You know, what happens in this country is up to the voters of this country to determine and decide, and we love the people of Hungary. But there's no reason to sugarcoat it. I'm going to be very blunt with you. The Prime Minister and the President have a very, very close personal relationship and working relationship, and I think it has been incredibly beneficial to the relationship between our two countries. What's that? I'm sorry?
The sanctions waiver on Russian energy purchases?
Yeah, but here's the way I would couch that. Those sanctions waivers happened as much as anything else because of the relationship between the Prime Minister and the President. And so I think all I can tell you is that relationship and the importance of that relationship and the importance of that relationship to our bilateral relationship underpins the decision the President made. And I think we'll continue to underpin it as long as that relationship is a factor in our bilateral relations.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. So the answer to your question, for those who are relatively young, it's difficult to know the Hungarian modern political history. But if you look at it carefully, you see that I'm not just registered as the longest-serving Prime Minister in Europe, which means 20 years, but I'm the longest-serving leader of the opposition with 16 years, so I spent 16 years as leader of opposition. What does it mean? It means that sometimes I lose, sometimes I win. So don't be afraid what will be if we are not winning, because it's regularly happened here, at least 4 times already. So there is no need to be afraid what will happen in Hungary. The Hungarian democracy is very strong. And the government of this country is very strongly believe on democracy and competitiveness and competition in politics as well, as we have done in the last 35 years. So our record is very strong on the governmental side and on opposition side as well. So government will be created after the election in Hungary based on the intention of the Hungarian people, and Hungary as a country will remain strong anyway.
Köszönöm szépen, az Indexet kérem a következőnek.